Okie doke. Now then, so what I'm using this time, I've been using poppy oil for the last, I don't know how many lessons, but I finally used the last drop. So I'm now on to linseed oil. Got this dinky little bottle here, which costs almost as much as it does to fill my car with petrol. But and I'm just going to tip that on my palette. I'm just, in fact, I'll tell you what I'm going to do because people do like to see it sometimes. This is my palette, and piece of glass on top of a sort of unit that I had built where I store paintings underneath, as you can see in there. And so I don't have to worry about paint dropping off the edge of the palette. It's just sort of floats about on the table. So there we are. And let's see if I can get that back to approximately where it was. Something like that. Okay. Lock the camera. Right, so I'm going to start with blue and grey, and hopefully I've got the lighting correct in here, and there shouldn't be too much reflection. If you see a reflection in the paint, Richard, maybe you could let me know, and I'll try and do something about it. But, I have the hardest room to light. Okay, so this is just blue and Payne's grey, and I'm not going to worry about sort of what it looks like, particularly on the painting. Something like that, I think, to start with, looks quite nice. And the transition between the land and the sky is going to be approximately there. So, and it doesn't even need to be exactly horizontal, but it's sort of quite close. Oh, you can see that. It's just below that streak, but it's not important at the moment. So here we go. Let's just get some colour on there. One of the things that's worth mentioning is that if you are new to painting, and you may find that because you're new, you'll start working on something. Just check that colour. That looks, yeah, that's quite strong. Beginners tend to end up with quite a lot of mud. Not necessarily, when I say mud, I don't mean the fact that the colour goes muddy. It's a term that usually means the paint is too thick. It's just too thick to handle it. So keep your paint reasonably thin in the beginning stages, and you won't get too muddied up. So it's almost like at this stage, it's almost like a stain rather than, you know, big globules of paint. For instance, if I take some blue with hardly any oil in it now and I put that there, you can see the difference. In fact, I quite like that. But, you know, if you're a newbie, try to avoid that. And it'll all become clear when you start to sort of try and make the sky, because you'll end up with something that looks just too samey. You know, you have to have, I always go on about this, you have to have contrast. So, and don't try to sort of smooth it. Don't do any of this sort of careful, you know, trying to get the blue exactly right, because you're not painting a door. You're not doing interior decoration. It only becomes interior decoration when somebody buys it. So let's just keep going. So what I'm after here at this stage is just to, you know, it's to get a feeling of movement in the sky. So, you know, going to be a big sweep there. I'm going to zoom back just a little bit. Okay, just so that you can see where I'm going to stop here. So another little hint, if you're painting along, whatever you do, one of the worst things you can do is divide a picture in half. So the sky is not, beg pardon, the horizon is not halfway down the picture. It's more than halfway down. It's not quite the rule of thirds, or is it? Maybe it is a rule of thirds. It's close to the rule of thirds. Slightly more landscape than I would normally have, but you know, you don't have to follow the rules exactly. And that's that dark bit in there. That's just a little bit of Payne's grey going in, because as I come down to the landscape, I want a sort of grey, dark, slightly foreboding feel to it. So let's just get that on there. And again, it's not particularly thick paint. It's just not got a lot of oil in it down there. There's more oil up here at the moment. I want that dark so that I can start making light interact with it in a few moments. And it won't be long before I get to that part. The other color I've got here, don't know whether I mentioned this, a little bit of royal blue. So, you know, I'm not cleaning the brush, I'm just adding it to what's already on there. And I know that I'm going to need that sort of in this area. So let's just get some of that on. And the fact that some of this grey and the darker blue are mixing in with it just adds to the what hopefully will be the interesting patina that you can get into a painting. That's the well, I don't know, maybe it's not the only thing, but it's one of the things that will help you get a bit of mystery in your work. In other words, nothing too flat and simple. I mean, at the moment we've got dark and we've got light, but it's what happens between the two that's going to make this interesting. So at the top here, I'm just going to put royal blue. Yeah. Sort of going the right way. In a moment, I'll be adding the reddish color, but not quite. I think I'm going to fill this with a mixture of the two, just to get a bit of light into it. Something to remember is that the darkest clouds will never be flat. In other words, if you decide that that's going to be a big dark cloud, what you don't want is just one color. You've got to have variations in it, and it adds to the mystery, and also the fact that you want things to look real. They've got to have a roundness. The reason I keep doing this, by the way, with the edge of the brush, is because there's the odd bristle falling out. Quite a big area to fill quickly, and you don't want to sort of be doing something like this with a little brush, which I've always found a bit odd. But some teachers, excuse me while I just figure out what that rattle is coming from. Oh, it's that. Okay. I've got a highly technical bit of equipment behind the painting, and it's called a bundle of trash bags rolled up to get a bit of tension between the wood that is holding the thing up and the actual board. There we go. Right. Let's see what happens. This is one of these things that I really like. Before I get the red on there, I just want to do something down the bottom here, just to show you how simple it is to get a little bit of mystery in your painting and a little bit of instant perspective. So I'm just wandering around listlessly here looking for a roll of paper. I've no found. Good. So, a bit of a reflection at the top. Excuse me if I just pop over here and move the light just a little bit. Good. Okay. Let's have a look down there and make it bigger, because this is fun, this bit. Okay. So you're going to see how quickly a landscape can appear in a picture without even trying. And let's see which one we're going to use here. So I think we'll use this one. Okay, again, this is a brush I used just yesterday. And if I get some white, I'm not going to put any oil in it, but if I start putting some light across here, I can get almost instantly, I can get distant hills and all kinds of interesting things. If you remember the painting that I flashed up on the screen, in fact, I've got the painting here, but it changed since I painted it. Maybe I'll just hold it up very quickly. My hand clean. So, okay, so this is, I added trees. I'm not sure that I'm going to add trees in it this time, but that's just to give you an idea of what actually happened to it. So let's have another shape or two in there. I'm not sort of thinking at the moment of tree or cloud or anything really. At this stage of the painting, I just think of colour and shapes and how they look next to each other, and are they interesting? Now that's sort of, you see what happens as soon as you have a transition, like from dark, you know, you already know in your mind that this is the sky because it's up there. Obviously, it's going to be the sky. So your brain is filling in an awful lot of detail for me. So let's say I want to then make the landscape slightly darker again down here. One rule that does work for a lot of people, certainly the way I work, is this idea that most of the work is done with the flat edge of the brush, not the tip. The tip is okay for certain things. I'll use the tip for, let's say I wanted to get rid of that little, these odd light bits in here. I've just noticed that I've got, how I did it, I don't know. I've got paint on my computer screen. Excuse me while I just clean that off. There we go. So these could be, this could be the light in the evening catching distant trees in wintertime. If you see what I mean. You've got to really look for the strange things. In fact, I'll tell you something quite interesting while I'm doing this. My wife teaches yoga and meditation, and she has a rug, and it's a very dark purple, and it's one of those that's got quite a deep, what do you call it, deep pile, very compressed fibers. It's one of those where you put your hand over it and you get all kinds of patterns on the rug quite quickly. And if you just sort of scrape it with your foot a few times and then look at it, you'll see shapes. Like it's very, very, it's almost like what you're seeing here. You know, you'll get things like a distant tower in the background, like so, and maybe a hill coming up there like that, or that sort of effect, you know? So you've got, you can just, you know, if you're really short of inspiration, I can go and scrape my foot on the rug and look at it and see what pops up. So I can drag it into this room. It's quite big. Maybe I could show you at the end. Anyway, so this, I don't want that at the moment. That's just to sort of give you an idea. So I can now simplify that all down just a little bit, make it a bit blurry. And now this is covered in brush marks. So there's two stages of skies when I'm painting skies, which is mostly, you know, what I do. One is to get everything down quite loosely like this. Then take off brush marks with one of these brushes that's completely clean. So the light, you know, flicking it across. Then there's the next stage where you put some clouds on and then you flick across again. You take off the brush marks. And then there's the final stage, but one where you use a palette knife and you put the clouds on, and then you go over it again to smooth the white that you've put on with the palette knife. Just have a little quick look around here, decide what's going to go next. And I think I'm going to just use my usual startup colors. So we're going to do sap green and red ochre. Now then, so let's think of a horizon line, something interesting. I could put trees in, I suppose, but maybe I'll keep them simple. Anyway, so down here, this is going to come out as quite dark. This is sap green and red ochre. So there's no real sort of plan. You just sort of make shapes. Sometimes you make shapes, stop making shapes, make shapes, leave a gap, which is probably what I did on the original. So if I just do that, so what I'm after is just the interesting transition between sky and very, very simple landscape. Maybe we could have a few things in there in the distance that just look as though they're poking up. And then what I was saying a few minutes ago, which I don't think I finished, if you keep the bristles pointing at the ceiling, it's quite a hard habit to get into. You know, resist the feeling that you've got to paint like this. That's not for this sort of brush, really. Try and think, well, you don't have to, but the way I think is it's like the inside of a desktop printer, back and forth, like so, because I can get interesting tones and shapes. So if I just sort of put some shapes on here, I'll just, before I turn it into, you know, what I'm actually aiming for, I'll just show you how to do a very simple snowscape without actually painting any snow. So there's a snowscape without painting any snow. And you can take it a stage further. Again, sap green, red ochre. I could put a line across here, like so. And there's the beginning of a track in the snow. So with very few additions, you can start to control where you want the viewer to go. By putting this line here, this is one of the oldest tricks in the book, putting that line there, and then putting another line here. It doesn't matter if there's something poking up. That could be something coming up through the snow. You know, things do pop up through the snow. And then just connect it down here. You've just a suggestion of the edge of a path. And there you are, you've got a track, or the beginning of a track going off into the distance through the snow. You could even put, with a bit more oil, I like doing this sort of picture for teaching because you can play around with it and do so much before you finalize what you're going to do. You can do all kinds of stuff. It doesn't matter what I do down here. It can all be changed. So imagine this is one of those tracks that occasionally, you know, a car or a farmer's vehicle goes up. So, you know, there might be a hint in the snow of some tire tracks. Very loose, just an idea. So something's driven along there and it disappeared here because it skidded off the painting. But, you know, that's how simple it is to do this sort of thing. So now I could change it another stage further on. Let's try a whole load more white just to get something on the horizon. Let's have something there. Okay, that didn't take long, did it? So it's obviously, you know, this is not a small painting. You can see by the size of my hand, I think, how big it is. Just putting a bar of white across there. And you can keep doing this until you get it to the way you want it to look. Okay, I'm not spending any time smoothing it out. All I'm doing is just one sweep across there, like so. So then I could get some, let's see what else we can do. I'm in a playful mood today. Let's get some more cleaner white and just have a little bit more of something over there, just a little bit more on one side. So there's your light source, which will bounce up behind this cloud to hit the top left-hand corner, which you'll see in a moment when I move the camera. The reason I'm saying that is to remind myself to do it, because Sometimes I forget. So let's bring these shapes back here. Let's see what we can do. There's something there. You see, look, just a couple of brush marks. So there's a little hill there, and below it, who knows what that is, but it gives the feeling that maybe there's a coastline just over there on the left-hand side. And it's literally just two touches with the brush. If you can do something with the minimum amount of brush marks, you know, you can achieve some quite dramatic effects, because not only is it sort of slightly mysterious, but it will look slick if you just do it with a touch. I'll have another go. So I had a sort of tree thing here, which I've cut the top off. Okay, I quite like that tree there, but I'm going to turn it into something else. I think we should probably have a bit of a hill. So very, very quick hill in the background. Okay, so we come up here. I'm using the paint that is already on the sky, mixing it with the green, and then dragging down like so. And using that color almost right across the picture. So there's a bit of distant hill with some light catching it. So if I want to then make that even more interesting, is there no end to the interest? I've got a brush here that had a bit of red on it. I wonder if I can use that. Yeah, I probably can. Let's see what happens when I do that. That's got some red in it. Let's see how much comes off. You probably can't see that. I can barely see it, but there's a slight bit of pink there. So what I'm going to do next, we're going to lose the snow. It's going to turn into something else. I'm going to use light green. And that's all it is. It's just called light green. Again, these are all made by Lefranc and Bourgeois. And light green is that color. It's just a very light green. And let's see what happens if I pull that across. Supposing I want some across there. Let's just see what that does. Seems to work all right. Let's break up that bit there. Okay, I think I might leave that sort of bright. This is pretty well everything off the palette now, this green, because I'm quite liking the effect of that. And if you wonder how much paint I put on the palette for a painting this size, I usually describe it as a large caterpillar on the palette, big enough so that you wouldn't want to pick it up, if you see what I mean. It's sort of too big to be friendly. So what am I doing here, apart from getting in the way? Let's keep out of the way. Now, a little trick. If I stand here and I move my arm like that, okay, chances are there's going to be a wobble in what I do. The way to get a straightish line, or as straight as you can get it, is to fix your arm. I'm in the way, I know, but then move your entire body with it. Just shift the weight from one foot to the other, and you'll find that you'll get much more horizontal lines and much cleaner. Another thing about horizontal lines in landscape, the bigger and longer the line that you can make without any sort of, you know, strange bumps in it, the more you will give the feeling of vastness. Obviously, if this painting was turned around landscape, because it's portrait shape, if this was turned around landscape shape, I'd have to go from, you know, down here to up there. This thing where you lock your arm and then move like so, you'll get a feeling of, like, you know, the plains of America. That's the way you paint your plains. So there, we've got some green there. All this stuff that I put below it doesn't matter. Now, I could leave it and say, well, that's the painting. It's snow, early snow, and it hasn't fallen over there yet. That's one way of doing that, I suppose. But I don't want to. I want to get it a little bit interesting. So, not that that's not interesting, it's just not quite interesting enough. So now I'm going to use quite a bit of oil. In fact, just to give you another glimpse, this is what has happened to my palette at this stage. So it's that's, you know, I don't know what that tells you, but it's like starting to get the sort of used untidy look. And each of the colors here, if I can just lock the camera while I'm mixing them, not everybody does it this way, but I'm not afraid if the greens mix into the blues here, the dark greens and the light greens, it doesn't matter because that's what makes paintings interesting. I hope you can see that. Camera might have moved, but whoops, not that one. Sorry. In fact, let's do a few close-ups of what we've got here. So there's that distant, strange hill there with possibly the sea beyond it. The bristles of the brush make nice, interesting streaks in the paint too. So over here, there's our hill with a nice slope to it. And I'll be sort of adding to that in a moment. And then there's our light green. And if I just zoom back a bit, I'll show you what I'm going to do in the foreground. That's it. Yeah, good. Whoops. In fact, I'll point further down so that it gets it higher in the frame. There we go. Right. So let's see what we can do down there. Now, there's what I did in the original picture is I basically pushed red ochre and sap green together to make slightly interesting textures. So I've got a bit of oil, probably about a teaspoonful, mixed with some red ochre, just so that it's slightly loose. It won't drip, you know, I can shake it like this, it won't come off. Right? Nothing happening, okay? But I just want to get a nice sort of stain here. And this is what I call something for later. And it's plainly obvious by now that, you know, what I'm not doing again. So I'm not sort of, you know, sitting on a chair, sitting here, carefully crafting all this stuff. Don't need to. You just get it on the board. Think of, you know, what you're painting. This is going to be a muddy area with grass. It wasn't carefully put there. You know, it's been blown around and been rained on, kind of stuff. In fact, you can probably figure out why I never paint pictures of people's gardens. They would be far too tidy for me. So what I'm after is texture and interest. So we're going to have a dark green. This is sap green pretty well without anything added across there. And then we've got our light green, obviously. So I'm just going to scumble the two together. As you can see, it takes ages. Very meticulous work. Use the brush. Let the brush make things for you. Just remember, you've got to know when to stop to see what you've done so that you don't go over it too many times. And you can see also that there's perspective starting to appear. The perspective is working because the green here, this green is actually quite a whitey green. It's not a yellow green. It looks a bit yellow on the video, but it's quite a white sort of green. Then you've got this dark green. Okay, so that brings that in front of that. I'm not sure I would want quite such a hard line. It depends what's going on. It could be, you know, that could be a field of, I don't know, whatever they plant. Wherever they plant that's edible. And, you know, maybe this is the bit that is, you know, just rough and ready here. I don't know. It doesn't actually matter because as long as it looks interesting and, you know, you get interest in the textures, then it probably won't matter at all. So anyway, you can break the barrier between the two just by a little bit of scumbling, I suppose you call that. It is a, yeah, slightly scumbly. Picking up some of this light green, and I could bring a little bit of it down here, actually, just the odd touch on the brush. You may not see it on the, yeah, you can't really see it. I'll exaggerate it a bit. So it would have this sort of effect. There's some of that, whatever it is sort of spilt down here, just in a few places where it just sort of shows up a little bit. There we are. You get You get the idea. So I'm building up a sort of patina. It's my favorite word at the moment. Might have to find another one so it doesn't get too boring. Okay, so I've got a big white space here, so I think I'm going to lose that. And as you can see, there's all kinds of stuff on the brush. I mean, in fact, I'm going to add more. I'm going to put a little bit of brown on one end. So the brown end is this end. That's the green end with a little light green and ordinary sap green. And just sort of put it down, see what goes on. And then I'll make it into something, hopefully, interesting in a moment. Even the odd bit of white showing through probably won't matter. There we go. So now, what can I do with that? Okay, if I get some paper, I can wipe through it a little bit, just add a few light bits on the ground. So we might have a hint of some kind of path going across there, a bit of light catching it. What else do we do? I think we can do a little bit of dark down the bottom, just to bring it right to our feet. So if I add darkness down there, like that, quite simply, like so, that pulls that towards you. Darker colors tend to hit you first, or hit your retina, and colors with red also projects forward. Colors that sit back are generally, it's quite an interesting thing. There has to be a certain amount going on between here and there to make these dark bits look far away. But generally it will work, so long as you've got some nice light areas, that'll send it back, and your brain will rationalize and say, well, that's obviously a hill in the distance there. And I'm just going to get something now to make that less bland over there. I'm going to try zooming in again. Whoops. Let's go over to that bit there. Okay, now I'm hoping that this doesn't, in fact, I'm going to just change my focus. That's locked. Okay, now I noticed the other day that when I was making a video, I had the camera on automatic, and of course every time I moved in to do all this, it confuses the camera sometimes and it sort of struggles to focus. So what I want to do with this stuff on the hill here is have a little bit of interest below it. Just check that you can see everything. Just going to zoom back a little bit. Let's go back to that. There we go. Right, so along the bottom here, let's have some shapes that could be, I don't know, foliage on the hill. A little something there. That's when you do this, this sort of thing, where you're adding, well, not really details, they're sort of pretend details. You can't just go blob, blob, blob. The blobs have to relate to what they're on. So if you've got a hill and you've got bushes down the hill, chances are they're going to be sort of in lines, almost like so, and use that to get people to sort of follow the line up the hill. And everything that I'm doing at this stage of the painting is, as I usually say, completely changeable. Don't feel that just because you've put something on the picture that it has to stay like that. This whole mountain could change. So in fact, I'm going to change it now. I'm going to take it up just a little bit there. So it almost fades into the sky, and then generally lighten the top edge. So some bit of dark bit there. I don't know what that is, that thing there, but whatever it is, it looks as though it should be there. I hope that makes sense. It's sort of, it's what they used to call, when I was a student, they'd say a device. They don't know what it is, but it might work. And if it is working, don't do anything to it. Let it continue to work. So here, you see I've got a little bit of dark on the corner of the brush, so I can sort of add some little interesting bits. What have we got here? We've got, well, I still like that enough to leave it, which is a bit unusual because this stage in a painting, you know, I might fiddle with that and take it off, or you know, but I actually quite like that, and I quite like the ground down here, but it's not finished yet. I'm going to do my little whipping trick, which is always fun, just to get some grassy effects. Let me just see what I can put here. I'm going to move the camera again. Okay, so down the bottom there, good. I'm going to just add a bit more darkness. Just something to work into. If you are an avid grass painter, you probably know it's tedious. Painting grass is really fiddly. And this is going to change your life because you don't need to paint grass. But before I show you, and I'm sure you know what I'm going to do, I just want to say one thing, and that is that a lot of people at the bottom of a painting have this thing where they paint these big blades of grass, like some kind of giant creature thing that comes up, and it's like it's almost like, you know, the grass is the same thickness as my fingers. I don't know what it is, but it's to be avoided. A, because it looks as though it might eat you, and you know, grass isn't like that unless you're lying on the ground and you've got a few blades of grass an inch from your eyeball, which you would not possibly want to do deliberately. So anyway, what I'm doing here with all these textures is just preparing it ready for the magic grass. And let's take a certain amount of strength. It's all in the wrist. And it starts life like this. So just get a piece of paper. I'll keep it zoomed in close there. So piece of paper. Make sure you can see it. It's quite strange this, but I have to turn around and look at my computer. Right, so you make these like tapers, really screw the paper up tight. Got to be solid because you're going to really give it a good, thoroughly good bashing. Okay. The reason I take the bottom edge off is when I'm doing it, I don't want the bottom contacting the painting there. So here we go. It's basically that. Now, I'll do a few more. It stops working after a while when the paper starts to change color. I'm not going to get much more out of that. But when you've made these blades of grass, what you do next is you make a shape like that. In other words, it's just sort of rounded off with a few bumps on it. And if you touch that on the ends of some of these things that you just made, you can leave it to dry, and then you can add color to these, or you just leave them because they'll end up looking like seed pods, like so. There's one, there's another. You have to keep moving it so that you've got clean. Let's try another one. There's a very thin one here. So let's just put something on the tip of it like so. And they won't all point directly upwards. They'll be all over the place. Now, because of this type of easel, you may be able to see, but the thing, you know, the base plank, I suppose, yeah, could be called a base plank. That's sort of in the way. Maybe you can't tell from that, but what I would normally do is I would raise the painting up and balance it right on the edge of this piece of wood. You may have noticed on your easel, you'll have these things, a piece of metal with a screw thing underneath. Now, if you loosen that, this piece of metal here becomes mobile. And in fact, you can pull it out so that if you have a very deep profile canvas, it'll clip to the front of your canvas to stop it falling off. But if you wanted to get right at the bottom of this, you would lift it, balance it on this top edge here, and use this to stop it falling off. Just a tiny bit of it, like, you know, just encroaching over the painting. I'm always amazed how many people don't know what they're for, but that's what they're for. Now, normally, if there was time, I would loosen everything, lift this up so that I can whip closer to the bottom edge, but I won't because I don't really need to at the moment. I'll just make do. There we are. That's all I'm going to do on those. You get the picture, I think. But it's a definite flick in the wrist. Yeah, quite hard work, especially on a really big painting. So now I'm going to just move the camera so you can see the top of the painting and do a bit of cloud. Should I zoom in a little bit more? I think that's pretty well. You can see enough there, I think. Okay, right. So we've already got all kinds of textures in the sky there. It's hard not to, actually. And I'm just going to try and find a biggish brush. Oops. Okay, oh, right. Now this one, I forgot that I had. It's amazing what you can find buried under stuff. Okay, this is a big brush. And that big. Very soft, mostly bristle, tiny bit of nylon in it, but not much. Bristle always tends to work better. And what I'm going to do with this, after I've checked some of the reflections, let me see if I can just get that reflection out of the way. Excuse me getting in front of the camera. Don't know whether I can, actually. That's worse. That's as good as it's going to get. So there are some strange things happening there. Not quite sure why, but anyway, it'll you'll see it at the end. It'll look good. Right, so this big brush, first thing you have to do is move the cat hairs or dog hairs, depending on what you've got. In my case, it's cat hairs. Right, so it's the sweepy thing to get rid of brush marks and loose hairs, because those marks will disappear a bit. Oh, no, it makes it worse, but anyway. It won't show when I take a photograph at the end. It'll be quite flat. So picking up a little bit of paint. So you just have to give your brush a wipe every now and then. Give you an idea what it's like for lighting in this room. There is a window behind the camera, which I've had to close the shutters on because it's the Sahara Desert outside at the moment. And the light bounces, comes through the window, it bounces off the floor and then up onto the painting. So I have a light over there, the other side, which is an LED bank of lights pointing at the ceiling so that the light can bounce down. And it's the only way I can get anything close to normal. What happens when I do that? That's worse. Never mind, you'll get the picture, I think. So all I'm doing is just, believe it or not, barely touching the painting, except when there's a hair. There's no point being careful when you've got a hair, just knock it off because you can always fix the paint Okay, let's see how that looks. That's quite bizarre. So if you can bear with me, and I hope, where are we? It's 9 minutes past 5 here. That's okay, because I started late. But I think I'm going to just fiddle with this light a bit, because heck. Right, I'm going to lean the painting forwards. That sometimes works. Ah, that's better. Okay. Right, well, it's better than it was anyway. So I don't think it's going to be completely wonderful. Just see what happens when I do that. Well, it's sort of interesting. Some people spend hours trying to get that effect, but it's not quite what I wanted, but maybe I won't worry. So anyway, so I've barely done anything to this. I basically put on a load of blue with Payne's grey, Ultramarine, Payne's grey, over here royal blue, because I want a little bit of lightness there. And then here, they're just sort of mushed together. And it gives you all these interesting sort of bumps and shapes that run through the sky. Yeah, okay, let me try with a brush. Could be that that one's just a little bit too spiky. Let's try, that might work. So, right, so this is a never used before brush. Let's see whether that's good, slightly better, I think. Apart from shedding hairs. Oh. Yeah, okay. Right, there's a strange line there, but that doesn't matter, because I'm going to be putting white around here any second now. Just see what happens if I do that. That's good. Right, so white palette knife. I have quite a collection of palette knives. You can use, the standard type of palette knife, which is, anything that looks like one of these, that sort of stuff. I know if you have little tiny dinky ones like that, that's okay if you've got a really small painting. The only thing I use this for, because it's so small, you see, if you're doing anything, any small detail that you do is going to be a little bit distorted because of the fact that it's so small, and whatever your hand does, it does. So if you've got a shape, it's going to shake. With big palette knives, they're much easier to control, because you can actually lay it on there and do stuff and sculpt things and make interesting shapes. But with the small one, you'll just gouge into it. And I'll show you that in a minute. So there's that type. You can use one of these if you want. A scraper for wallpaper, you could use that. And but the standard size I use for my clouds is this size. Just happens to sort of work, and nice effects. So you don't need to put the white particularly on one edge, it's just on it. Anywhere on it will do. So let's see what we can do. Let's have a little bit of white digging in there. And a bit there. And again, there's no precision. There's no need for it at the moment. If you start being precise in a painting too soon, you'll end up with a sort of cartoony look, and also it'll be, well, cartoony and tight. You want movement, particularly in the sky, because let's face it, they are always moving. So let's just get some on there and see what happens. Bring it down there, I think. There are bits of this, you could leave that. I quite like that shape there. That's got movement. This is quite static. Doesn't matter at the moment. That's not worried. I'm not worried about that being mobile. I want the edges up here to look as though the wind's hitting them. That'll look more subdued in a moment. Let's have a little bit of something hanging over there. And I'm literally shoveling paint on that. And then this expanse here needs a bit of something going on in it, but I think we should probably have one there. And again, you see, I'm not painting clouds. Or if they're coming out as clouds, then it's subliminal, because it's just, at the moment, it's just composition and colour and tone, hopefully in the right place. And I'm going to need a few bits that drift back into this dark area here. What else should we do? Just for the heck of it, we might have a few low-lying clouds on this one across the sky, like so. And I'll leave them to sit until I get to them. It's just, you know, the bare essentials there of a bit of low-lying cloud. Okay, so back to the clean brush. Just give my hands a quick wipe. Okay, we'll check on the camera, make sure you can see pretty well everything. So, okay, so off we go. And I barely touch it. But this is where I always think this is where the magic starts to happen, because suddenly you get these. Whoops! And like I said before, you get a bristle. Oh, I was going to talk about cheap brushes like this, and I figured out that I can get, I suppose, 2 paintings out of one brush, one of this type of brush. This costs €2, which is pretty well $2, I think. Now, if I take this brush when I finished and I clean it, I've got to massage soap into it to get the paint to move. I could use turpentine, but I don't, because it's horrible, deadly stuff, really bad for you. So I was using the soap detergent method anyway. And so I figured, okay, so you've got the detergent, which you buy in a plastic container. You take the detergent out, you massage it into the brush. Once you've got the paint off, you then put it under a tap, and it has to be under that tap for a long time to get all the soap out, otherwise the brush won't work. And then I figured, well, that's a lot of water. One brush is going to be about 6 or 7 pints of water, maybe even up to a gallon. So that's not necessarily good for anyone. So I figured that the handle is wood. This is metal, obviously, here. That's called the ferrule, that's metal. And the bristles, if I throw that into the recycling, it'll all get used up. The metal will be be melted. The bristles, they'll probably burn off. And the wood will get mashed up, turned into paper. So I'm thinking it's better for the planet if I don't actually worry about cleaning them. Maybe I should just recycle. It's all done very well here in France. For instance, just before I started painting, I went up to the local déchetterie, which is the rubbish dump, and they have containers for every single possible thing you could think of. So I might try that. It will save water, at least. So there we are. It's a very quick, quite dramatic sky. These straight lines that appear, if you ever get one of those and you think, well, I don't really want these straight bits, there's one there's a few coming down there. All you do is you get the corner of the brush and then just mush it a bit, like so, and lose them, spread them out a bit, etc. Some I actually quite like them, but not everyone would. So And as I always say, as I'm doing this, I am barely touching it. There's some paint on there. That's the bit where I just did the scumbly bit on the edge. But generally, you know, there's hardly any paint, beg your pardon, hardly any contact with the painting. It's the lightest touch that you can actually get away with. Now, let's have a look at the whole thing. I think I need a bit more cloud up there. Let's just chuck something up there and just see what happens. I'm going to move the camera in a minute so you can see the top bit. And always remember, you know, cloud must go off the edge of the painting. It looks more professional and realistic. So I think we need a bit of light there. Quite like that. Maybe just a little bit more intensity in that bit. So now I'm at the stage where I'm thinking composition. You see, I'm thinking, where do I want people to go in the painting? And I certainly want them to, you know, start. I want them to start somewhere and end up hopefully back where they started. So we've got a circular shape here. You know, our eyes like to travel around circles. Something about circles. I don't know what it is, but then on the ground, I'm going to move it back in a minute so you can see that. I want that's to lead them up the painting. And we'll be going back just to have a quick look at that in a minute. Okay, these are jet-powered seagulls heading in that direction. Of course, they're not really, they're just bits of paint. Someone asked me the other day on YouTube, why is there no wildlife in your paintings? I haven't answered yet, but I'm thinking of saying something like, they are there, you just can't see them because, you know, when you go out for a walk in the countryside, if the animals see you first, usually you won't see them. So that's where my animals are. They're looking back at you and they're thinking, no, get out of here because he's got a paintbrush. So, although I had a bright idea, yes, I think it was yesterday. It's either yesterday or the day before. I was talking to my delightful student, who I hope is still watching. Can't see on the list, but I can't see the whole list on my screen. Anyway, Zoré, if you're still there, I'm thinking of putting a rabbit in my paintings. Somewhere there'll be a bunny rabbit hiding. And they're very easy to paint because it's a big blob with a small blob or circle with a V shape on top, and that will make a rabbit. So I'm thinking of hiding a rabbit in my paintings. So there was an old master artist, I never remember which one it is. It could be El Greco, I'm not sure. El Greco, and he always had a mouse in his paintings, hiding away somewhere. Right, I'm sort of reasonably happy with the sky. So this bit here, right, so I'm going to try and blur that. You may see that it's quite crisp in a few places. If I'm lucky, I can just do it with one or two touches. So if I just like so, just to sort of calm it down a bit. That's quite nice. Now this line of cloud going across here, just going to adjust the camera so you can see that. Right. Okay, so same brush, just the smoothing brush. I've got this line, quite interesting, I suppose. I can do one swipe across it and hope that works, or I could sort of fiddle with it, but I'm going to go for the simple option, which is that, and just see what happens. That's actually quite interesting. But I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I'm painting it. So I'm going to just do it a couple of times more. Quite an interesting line of clouds. Yeah, I like that. That's okay. I think I'll keep it. So when this is dry, I would then go over it and put a bit of red, maybe, if I feel like I need to. Oh, I haven't got the red here. Now, if I want to put a bit of red there, what did I do with the red brush? I had a red brush. Okay, I've got so much paint on it, it's green. Don't want that. Bear with me 1 second while I find a brush that I can add red to. Okay. Oh, and I've got this high-tech device that I'm going to show to you when I finished. I'll take it over and show you, from my chair. It's a high-tech device for keeping your brushes safe and clean. And it is so simple, unbelievably simple, but it's highly effective. Right, so I've got a completely clean brush, and I'm just going to put some red ochre on it, just on the corner, like so, and then just scrub it in there, like so, just a bit. And that's pretty well it. It's just paper. I'll smooth it a little bit because it's a bit bumpy, but just to get a little extra colour in that slightly dark area. So I just go back and forth a few times, like so, just to get the brush marks off. There we go. And I think that may be almost it. So clouds. Okay, so clouds, they're not difficult, are they? You have to agree after seeing this. Clouds are unbelievably easy things to paint. And it's mostly, I think it's 90% attitude, 10%, 8% practice, 2% talent. Who knows? Now, I would probably do a little bit more down here, but I think I've been painting quite long enough. Simple foreground, just a sort of muddy bit of a field, which goes to prove you can take anything. You can go out and see something in nature, or a scene that is. Terence Cuneo, yeah, the mouse. I see that on the screen now. Yep. Thanks for reminding me of that. I always liked his work. I remember going to see some of his stuff at the, I think at the time it was in the, well, there's some in the Science Museum in London, and I think the Tate Gallery. I remember going to see them when I was very young, and he specialized in things like steam trains and interiors of factories, that sort of stuff. Very, very talented chap. In fact, one of my tutors at college knew him quite well. They might have studied together or something. Right. Okay, I'm just having a very, very quick look to see if there's anything I need to do. And I can see straight away that there is something I need to do. So you get to put up with me for a few minutes longer. Just don't like that shape in there. It comes down the hill. That's sort of interesting, but I think I need to. Am I in the way? Yeah, probably. I just need to bring that up. That's better. Yeah, right. So I'm going to stop there. I'll move the camera back. And if I can't get a photograph done to send you now, it'll be on my Facebook page after we finish chatting. So I'm just going to zoom back. Yeah, the whole thing. Okay, so there we are. There's the top. Whoops. And there's the bottom. So there we are. Right, I'm going to go and sit down, and you can ask me pretty well anything you like. Oh yeah, and I'll bring this incredible device.